So apparently Acura has just released the RSX nameplate. Yeah, that one. And I had just woken up this morning when I had seen it, and I was like, oh, but this is going to be a very different video, not necessarily talking just about the specs and the overall design of the car, but more importantly, yeah, we need to talk about these nameplates. What's up, guys? My name is Chris, and welcome to The Breakdown, where we talk about everything cars, news, and reviews. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're not, always, and of course, welcome back. Just this morning, Acura released their all-new coupe-like performance SUV titled the RSX. Now, for those of us who were there, the RSX used to be a Civic-based liftback that was pretty much a board racer that could be afforded by the average working man. This new one is going to be completely different, and I've got a few thoughts, and they're not necessarily bad, but, you know, there is some level of constructive criticism along the lines. And I think the biggest thing is that nameplates mean a lot and they hold legacy, and we'll be talking about that a little more into the video. So with that being said, stick around and stay tuned because you are now watching The Breakdown. Okay, if you are new to the channel, you probably are not aware. So normally I start with a backstory, I give a history lesson. I'm not doing that today. This is a little more just kind of off the cuff. So I'm going to be looking at my notes from time to time. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section and I'll try to respond to them as best as I can. So this particular model is based off the performance EV that debuted back in Monterey, and Acura has been doing a big due diligence about focusing their efforts on expanding their lineup. Now, the problem that I have that I've noticed about a lot of these cars and things is that there's always going to be moans and groans.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks! Yeah, over them.
I can hear it now. A lot of the RSX fanboys, which is borderline a cult classic for the automotive community, a lot of us will probably have some gripes and complaints because it doesn't look like the old one. Okay, sure, Jan.
And he thinks I'm super cool. Sure, Jan.
And so this new one is going to be a SUV-based platform. Now, I have hundreds of ideas, and I mean hundreds, of car stuff, news, reviews, whatever. And I wanted to release a video probably about 2 years ago about the nostalgia of nameplates, but I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So this RSX will be a EV-based SUV platform, and Kurt Kriefels has already done the tech specs if you want to get into the nooks and crannies or whatever. I'm not working hard, so I'm gonna go ahead and let my guy do all the work. I'll leave a link in the description below. But for the new RSX, it is going to be using the underpinnings of the Honda Zero, which basically just released, I want to say last year it just released. And the Honda Zero has a lot of unique things, and this RSX will also be using the Osmo OS system, which is the next advancement of Honda products. Now, for all of you who don't know, Honda is not just a car company, it is also a mobility company, and they focus their efforts on so many different arenas of human mobility. And the Acura lineup has been doing a really good job of expanding their fleet, and this one in particular is set for launch hopefully at the end of this year. I don't know how that'll work, especially with the introduction of the new Honda Nissan merger, and now they're going to be pushing a lot of their efforts towards their Honda hub in Ohio for production, which will have a mixed bag of electrification, hybridization, as well as internal combustion engine, all from one factory for consolidation and optimization, all that good stuff. Now, we don't have any tech specs. We don't know if it's going to get the Type S treatment, and we don't know what the interior looks like because they haven't fully unveiled it. And we also don't have any price points. Now, before I give this criticism, I want to say this, is that I think the actual RSX for this go round looks great. It looks really good from what I've seen. And I like the performance EV concept that debuted, and I thought it was a mixed bag of Porsche and Buick influences wrapped into an Acura style design. The problem that I see here is that this particular rendition of RSX conflicts with what a lot of people view an RSX to be. But more importantly, I don't think this got the opportunity to have its own life. And what I mean by that is that this car did not have an opportunity to develop its own brand. The ZDX isn't doing that well, and I don't think it's because it's called the ZDX. I think it's genuinely because it's overpriced, especially being that it shares a lot of components with General Motors. And that's not really a bad thing because the Cadillac Lyriq is apparently amazing for a lot of people who have experienced it. But the problem with a lot of this is that nameplates mean a lot, and when a car company brings back an old nameplate, it can be a really good thing or it can be a really disastrous thing. And I want more car companies to stop bringing back old nameplates that aren't remotely close to what the nameplate used to be. Now, the Prelude just came out, and the Prelude is comparable to what the old Prelude was, with some exceptions, which is really just the new age CRZ. And the ZDX that Acura brought out is not really the old ZDX that came out back in 2010, 2009, somewhere in there, because it was a fastback coupe, and this new ZDX is more like a traditional electrified SUV. Now, it seems as though the Acura strategy is to bring back a lot of those old nameplates, as the RSX is the second EV to come out of the Acura lineup. And I will say this, is that the RSX represents very different this go round than it did back then. I would assume that unless it is going to be a affordable, basically an affordable SUV that is an EV, roughly in between the $25,000 to $30,000 lineup, I don't see this being as much of a hit as it could be. And I also want to point out that the electric space is very much divided. The automotive world has not necessarily bought into it, but we hadn't bought out of it either. And there's a lot of car companies going one way. There's another car company that will go another way, another car company that'll split the middle. We as a industry are just divided on how we want to go and move forward with this EV thing. And I also want to point out that the ADX just released, so I don't know how this is going to translate, given that the ADX is probably going to be a hit next to the RDX in terms of sales, and how that's going to go forward for this nameplate. The other thing is that I think that the nostalgia bag that car companies go into, it almost stifles the ability that most of the cars that are being brought back to life don't really get a good footing. I remember when the Integra first got debuted, and a lot of people had a lot to say about it. And granted, it was fundamentally what the Integra was back then, but I do think that it kind of lucked out because the Civic just got too expensive and too premium. So people started moving to the Integra, so it created a vacuum of sales for the Acura lineup. And I think that with the ADX coming out, I think that is going to steal a lot of sales about this performance SUV. And the other thing to remember is that it will have the dynamics of an Acura. It will have the Acura soul, but it won't have the Acura soul behind the name. And the name is big because I think from an enthusiast standpoint, that is where a lot of people give the support the green light. And you don't need our support, you just need the dollars. But the RSX nameplate, I think, should not have been used for this particular model. If it were an electrified version of the Integra, absolutely brilliant. Mwah, would have loved it. But I think going for this one, this could have been reserved for something else. And I just want more car companies to start giving more innovation to the nameplates themselves, instead of allowing the nostalgia of those old nameplates to carry the sales. And we see this in other areas of, consumption. We see this in movies, we see this in music. At some point somebody goes back and trails the roundabout to pull back out that old good stuff to give you that good feeling, because nostalgia sells. But overall, I don't hate this design. I think it looks really good for what it is. I just don't think it's an RSX. And I think that's probably going to be the conflict in many enthusiast minds. And we'll just have to see when Acura releases more news about it. And they are slated to have production later on this year. But you guys leave me a comment below and let me know what you think about this new RSX. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think it'll do well? And how do you feel this will translate into Acura's strategy going forward towards electrification? More importantly, how this strategy is going to tie into their release of the ADX and how this is going to translate into sales of their internal combustion engines, considering they have no hybrids and just EVs and internal combustion. But with that being said, until the next video, I will see you guys later.